The presence of the sad stranger. I was never the skittish or introverted type. I had inherited the overconfident swagger of my father, and a broad physique from my years of rowing. If I felt like someone had a problem with me, if they meant to have a go at me for some reason, I would go up to their face and demand an answer. If none was given, then I made it clear that the next time I would beat it out of them. I felt untouchable, like I could go toe to toe with a mountain lion if I had to. Then, I can't exactly remember when it started, I felt like a presence had begun to follow me everywhere I went. For no reason at all, their hairs would stand rigid on the back of my neck, and my heartbeat would quicken, painfully so at times. When I'd walk home from training, I'd go at a quicker pace than usual, or when the tension became overwhelming, I would quickly turn around, trying to catch them in their pursuit, but of course there was nobody there. I could feel that all these cases were slowly ramping up to some dreaded culmination in my near future, and on that Saturday morning, it all came crashing over me like a cold wave. I was out in the river in a scull, a thin one-man boat that could capsize very easily if your balance was off. I had been late coming in, so everyone else was much further up than me, but I wasn't too bothered by that. The coach hadn't set any pieces for us that day, so it was just a casual row down the river. It was a foggy morning, and the cold air perfectly offset the warm sweat building on my neck and in between my shoulder blades. I was reaching out to take my next stroke when my back suddenly seized up. A flaring pain like all the discs had been fused together, and my spine had become one long, warped bone. I couldn't lean back, and the oars were dragging through the water, threatening to twist the boat over and dump me into the freezing water. In the condition I was in, with everyone so far away, that was an impending death sentence. My arms, too, had become like wet noodles, all the muscles turned soft and spongy. I couldn't hold on to my oars. Letting go, I managed to push off with my feet and curl into a fetus-like position on the boat, with my head resting on the side. The boat drifted into the side of a reed bed, the oars now entangled, but at least now there was some semblance of balance, and I could wait for the pain to subside. Through the reeds I saw the mist part down the river, revealing an object hovering in the air. I thought I had lost my mind, that the seizure had reached my head and squeezed my brain until all sense of reality was gone, leaving only a dry husk left. It was a door, a white nondescript door, with a small circular window. Through it I could see some activity was happening behind it, and suddenly the door opened. Something stepped out and closed the door slowly behind it. It wasn't a man, more like a man-shaped gap in the air, vaguely semi-transparent, with the edges all blurry and fizzy, like an electronic current was flowing through it. I could barely make out its face, but there was suggestion of it having eyes, ears, a nose, and a mouth, like anyone else would. I wanted to say it was a ghost, but some deep part of me told me that was wrong. I had never been a fan of the pulp fiction about men from outer space, but that seemed to be the closest thing to compare it to. It didn't belong here. Of that my heart and mind were certain. It was an intruder, not just of this world, but of my world, like a snag in an otherwise perfect chain. It immediately took notice of me, half hidden in the reeds. From where I reckoned its mouth must be, the air tightened like turbulence from an aeroplane. I don't know if it was smiling or snarling, but it was slowly coming towards me, with its arms spread open. Did it want to strangle me, dunk me in the water, or to envelop me? I wanted to shout, make myself seem more aggressive than afraid, but my voice had completely abandoned me in my time of need. The thing was getting closer, and seemed to be talking, but whatever it was trying to say seemed muffled and far away. All I could hear was the thrilling of my heart, and the blood rushing like a waterfall in my ears. Its arms were moving, gesticulating as it talked, poking its chest and pointing back at me. Its approach wasn't creeping or cautious. It seemed to pace around a bit, take a few casual steps towards me, and pace around again as if getting to me wasn't really its goal. Goal or not, it was getting too close now for my liking, and I was suddenly feeling a lot more energetic than I had been when it first appeared. I managed to thrash around in my boat like a stranded fish, and I let out a raspy scream with as much animalistic rage as I could muster. As soon as that happened, the being stopped dead in its tracks and its mouth shut tight. I saw its arms slump to its side as if defeated. At first its eyes flashed with unbridled rage, and I was sure it was going to drop its pretense of a casual approach and lunge towards me. Instead it turned away, with a final look with what I swear to God looked like utter hurt and sorrow in its eyes. It walked back to the door in the middle of the river and disappeared. The door had faded away like an afterthought, and all pain and paralysis had left my body. I sat up in my boat, shaking myself loose, and with my heart still pumping at 1,000,000 miles an hour, I rowed quickly as I could back to the club. The encounter had left a mark on my psyche and had other more fantastical and disturbing effects on me. It wasn't anything I noticed after the first couple of days, but as things had ramped up before the event, so did the repercussions. I had developed some sort of clairvoyance. News on the radio evoked a sense of déjà vu within me, and oftentimes I remembered little things that would happen only moments later. As well as this newfound ability, I had acquired some strange sense of right and wrong, not like a moral sense of it, but that of things that should and shouldn't happen. When my father, who worked in construction, cut his hand on an electric saw, the wound had quickly become infected. It had been an old, rusty saw blade that had nicked him, and the word on every doctor's lips had been sepsis. I watched this humorous, warm hulk of a man turn inside out. His veins went red from blood poisoning, and he was rushed to the nearest hospital, with all sorts of cables and wires piercing his skin like some god-forsaken marionette. It was heartbreaking to sit there by his side and have him wandering around his own made-up world that had yet to introduce his son in it. It was an inescapable nightmare, one I never wanted to be the victim of in any shape or form ever again. But this seemed like something that was meant to happen. That newly developed region in my mind was quietly assuring me through this anguish that this was all part of the plan. There was no logic in this system. Second case in point was when I started feeling the presence manifest again. This time I knew what the awful conclusion would be, and I wanted to tell someone about it. My father had passed away, leaving me and my mother alone in the big house. The worst part was the lack of a presence from my father. This intruder, had taken it all up for itself, and left me only an image of my father. When I came home from school or training, I felt no trace of him. I wanted to tell my mother what I encountered on the river, that I might need help. I waited for weeks to say it. I wanted to let her mourn before dropping the bombshell that her only son was quietly going insane, and I never told her. It felt like going against a strong current, and that sense of right and wrong was practically screeching at me for how wrong it would be to mention it. I even tried to write it down and shyly hand her a note over dinner, but instead I would just doodle, or scrunch up the page in anger. Maybe it was my own fragility that was working against me. To admit that you were feeling this way, like some sort of pathetic mess, I would be ridiculed and laughed at and called a pansy. It was my burden to bear, not my mother's, so I never told her. In the meantime I had quit school to become the man of the house, and whether my father would be proud or outraged, I began working in the same construction company that he used to be a part of. The manual labour put my mind off the thinking, and that was good. In the sweltering heat, even when I felt the presence swirl around me, I focused on cementing bricks and pushing wheelbarrows around. The cacophony of heavy machinery and men at work drowned out everything else, and I was being my cocky self again. 4 months in, and we were renovating the old council hall. I was 5 stories up in the scaffolding, propping a ladder up to another walkway above me. When I was satisfied it would stay standing, I turned to pick up my toolbox, and the door was there instead at the other end. I'll admit that I considered jumping, and maybe I would have if my muscles hadn't turned to mush and my spine turned rigid. I slumped down, leaning against a window of the council hall for support. Nobody else seemed to notice the state I was in, and my sense of right and wrong was telling me that this had never happened. It was telling me that today after work I would have gone to the bar with my workmates and flirted with a pretty girl, that she would stick around for years to come. That's what should have happened, but the darn door was in the way. As before, there was some activity before it opened, but this time I saw another figure, what looked like a nurse. Then the being slid through and back into my reality, clearer now, particularly around the face, and I could see that it was holding back tears. A voice behind the door, I could hear it, but not the words, was talking to the being, sounding a little weary like the tail end of an argument, but the being shook its head and turned to me. The sad stranger, a perfect term for this thing. This time it made no pretense of being casual and came walking purposefully, quickly towards me. I shrank back in fear as it kneeled next to me, and I'm ashamed to admit it, but I relieved myself when it grabbed my hand. Where it had touched me, I saw my skin was turned shriveled and mottled with spots, my veins sticking out like train tracks. The stranger was lifting me off the ground, surprisingly gentle. It was then that I noticed that the cacophony of machinery was completely gone, and I wasn't up in the scaffolding anymore. I was in a room, a white room with a large clean bed that I was slumped against, and a bedside table with flowers and cards. The sad stranger was helping me back to my bed, pulling the covers over my frail body and hooking me back up to the beeping machines. I looked around bewildered and on the brink of tears. I thought I'd already been crying. I felt warm drops on my cheeks and neck, but those tears were coming from the stranger. He wiped them away and smiled tiredly at me. I could see him clearly now. He had inherited my broad shoulders and his mother's red hair. He pointed to the flowers by my bed. Those are from Marcy. She picked them out herself. She'll be turning 6 next week. Does that ring any bells? Marcy? Marcy? He noticed my confusion and took in a long, shaky breath. That's okay. I'm sure you'll remember at some stage, right? He pulled over a chair and sat next to me. I just wanted to. He began before his face crumpled and he buried it between his arms. He cried for a long time before managing to compose himself. Susie and I have decided that this place isn't cutting it for you. There's a place up by the river. You know where you used to row? There's a good place up there, really nice people that I think are going to help you out more. You know, like with eating or writing. Maybe you can write a few things. If that's how you want to communicate, we can get a transcriber for you. Does that sound good? He steeled himself in the next bit. The thing is, I wanted to say, this place is further away, and I'm going to try my best, I swear to you. Get the kids to see you soon, I promise, but I won't be able to visit as often as I wanted to. I'm sorry. He talked for a bit more, his hands strong and warm in the bundle of sticks that mine had become. I tried to listen, I really did, but I was coming up to the final 50 metres, and I was only half a boat ahead of the competition, so of course I had to keep myself focused there. The stranger was fading away, going back to that door in the distance, as I heard the klaxon honk. I had won, but barely. I heard him say, I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. Hey guys, thanks for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy it, I would love it if you could please subscribe and leave a comment telling me what you think and what you think I might be able to do better. Thank you folks, and have a lovely day.